Welcome to History Headlines. This is a new series for IHSHG that offers a roundup each month of major stories and news in history so you can stay informed with what's going on in the historical world. In this episode, we'll cover the discovery of the Endurance, Timbuktu's manuscripts going online, new revelations about Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn, and the discovery of the biggest Roman mosaic in 50 years in London. If you enjoyed today's content and you haven't already, please do consider liking and subscribing, as well as checking out our YouTube channel, Facebook, and Spotify for more historical content in English and Portuguese. Without further ado, we'll begin, and our first history headline is one of the biggest discoveries in modern archaeology, and the successful conclusion of a dangerous journey into the freezing Antarctic. This was absolutely groundbreaking when it first came out, and I'm sure that if you've been following the news in March, you've probably already seen some stories about this already. I am of course talking about the discovery of the Endurance, the ship of the Edwardian explorer Ernest Shackleton, who attempted to cross the Antarctic in 1915. In early March, 107 years after it sank, this amazing ship was discovered again by a crew aboard the South African icebreaker Agulhas II, with a team of archaeologists accompanied by historian and podcaster Dan Snow, who recorded much of the journey on his website History Hit. The ship carried the crew of Sir Ernest Shackleton, an Antarctic explorer who had tried to make it to the South Pole several times before, at the height of European exploration of the Arctic in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was crushed by sea ice in 1915, forcing Shackleton and his crew to make a risky escape across the ice in small lifeboats, crossing miles on land and sea to reach safety. This extraordinary escape, and the conditions the crew battled through to survive, has cemented Shackleton's place as a model of a leader who kept going through the harshest of conditions and was one of the most celebrated explorers in all of British history. The ship currently sits on the seabed of the Weddell Sea, that's normally covered in a thick layer of ice for most of the year. Braving that ice though, along with blizzards and temperatures of minus 18 degrees centigrade or minus 0.4 degrees Fahrenheit, the crew of the Agulhas II were able to find this remarkable shipwreck that's been lost for over a century, using unmanned submarines to capture some extraordinary photos of the vessel itself. Low levels of sea ice in the region, a historic low in fact since 1970, allowed the crew to get in and discover the ship after weeks of searching without success. Due to the lack of wood-eating creatures in this ocean, the ship has remained incredibly well intact, with Dan Snow even reporting paintwork glistening, nails shining, and there were what looked like to be new planks. Mission leader Dr. John Sears described it as jaw-dropping and a successful completion of the world's most difficult shipwreck search. Other crew members reported seeing the brass plaque with the ship's name, its wheel and hull still intact despite damage from the ice, and even a porthole to Shackleton's own cabin aboard the ship. After discovering the ship, the team recorded it and took photographs with the unmanned submarines on the Agulhas II. As the ship is officially a designated monument under the International Arctic Treaty, it won't be moved or have anything taken from it. Instead, it will stay at the bottom of the freezing Weddell Sea, as a testimony to this perilous voyage to the southernmost tip of the world. Secondly, we go to Mali, where a new project seeks to document the manuscripts of the great city of Timbuktu online. This project, called Mali Magic, documents over 10,000 pieces from the legendary city, as well as the culture and history of Mali. These manuscripts, coming from one of the biggest and most famous centers of learning in pre-colonial Africa, contain rich learning on a wide variety of subjects, such as mathematics, astrology, law, philosophy, and even biology and music. Speaking about the texts, librarian and historian Dr. Abdelkadir Herrera said that, quote, "Central to the heritage of Mali, they represent the long legacy of written knowledge and academic excellence in Africa." As well as making them more accessible to a wider audience, celebrating the rich history of Mali, and showcasing the scholarly excellence of pre-colonial West Africa, this project also plays a vital role in preserving texts that have been continually threatened since their very creation. A number of groups have tried to destroy this remarkable collection of texts over the centuries, from medieval rulers such as the Songhai Empress Sunni Ali, to modern extremist groups that sadly still threaten the stability and peace of Mali to this very day. In 2012, when Timbuktu was taken over by extremists, a concerted effort was made to smuggle the manuscripts to safety, with many individuals placing themselves at risk to save these precious sources of learning from devastation. In 2016, one extremist leader was placed on trial and found guilty of the first count in international legal history of ordering an attack on religious or historical buildings, cementing the vital precedent that damaging buildings with this significance is a crime. This isn't the first time these manuscripts have been attempted to be preserved. Efforts to conserve them have been undertaken by bodies in South Africa and the United States, but by placing them online, their conservation is now ensured, meaning that generations afterwards can look into these extraordinary texts and learn more about Timbuktu and the kingdoms that supported it. Mali Magic is now live to see for yourself, and if you fancy diving into the world of Malian scholarship, you'll be able to find the manuscripts translated into English, French, Spanish, and modern Arabic. Our third headline takes us to Tudor England, where the Express reported a fascinating new revelation about the relationship between Henry VIII and his second wife Anne Boleyn. Tudor history aficionados, and those who have seen the musical Six, will no doubt know their relationship and the scandal surrounding it. But in case you need a refresher, Anne was Henry's second wife, a woman he chose to marry partly out of love and partly to try to secure a male heir. The Pope's refusal to endorse the marriage and subsequent divorce from Henry's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, led Henry to break from the Catholic Church and form the Church of England, the state religion of the UK to the present day. In 1533, Henry married Anne, although their relationship degenerated quickly, with Henry ordering Anne's execution just 3 years later. Now, of course, the popular image of Henry VIII is of a sadistic tyrant, who enjoyed chopping off the heads of people who angered him. But according to Tudor historian Sandra Vasoli, fresh research suggests that Henry may have in fact regretted ordering Anne's death, but only confessed this in the final hours of his life. Vasoli found this reading through an old French manuscript known as Cosmographie Universelle, written by a traveller and Franciscan monk called André Thévet. In one passage of his book, he describes how the king lamented the way he treated Anne Boleyn, and confessed to the nobles surrounding him that he falsely accused her of infidelity and regretted having her executed, stating that she died in good Christian standing. Now this seems extraordinary, but according to Vasoli, it is in fact consistent with the final days of Henry's life, where he only allowed a few trusted noblemen to be at his bedside and confessed his sins to them before passing away, provided that the noblemen who told André Thévet about this are a reliable source, and there's little reason for them to make up a story like this. It suggests that Henry may not have been the bloodthirsty figure we paint him as today, and was more complicated a figure than it would initially seem, as is often the case with history's most famous figures. According to Vasoli, this has largely gone unnoticed by historians, owing to the fact that texts like the Cosmographie Universelle are written in dense manuscripts in Old French, and the specialist skills needed to read the text have thus meant that less attention has been given to them than you might expect. But thanks to Vasoli's meticulous research, we're able to see a very different side to this infamous Tudor monarch. And finally, we go to London, where the biggest Roman mosaic in 50 years has been unearthed in Southwark, in the southern part of the city. It was found by archaeologists working on the site in late February, and features an intricate design with flowers, diamonds, and intertwining strands. The mosaic is believed to have been the floor of a dining room, or possibly a mansio, a sort of classy guest house for Roman officials and messengers travelling to and from the city. It's dated to the late 2nd to the early 3rd centuries, and the design too is believed to have come from the so-called Acanthus group, a workshop of mosaicists that created mosaics for some of the wealthiest individuals in Roman Britain. The Museum of London's Archaeology site supervisor, Antonietta Lertz, called this a once-in-a-lifetime find in London, and discussed what a pleasure it was to work on such a large site undisturbed by later developments. She noted too that when the first flashes of colour started to emerge through the soil, Everyone on site was very excited. The mosaic is currently being recorded and assessed to see if it's safe for transport, so more conservation work can take place, and discussions are currently in place to see if it'll be put on display for the public. And with that, we come to the end of our first episode of History Headlines. Thanks very much for listening, hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time.